Hello everybody. As the year 2023 draws to a close, it is now an apposite time to discuss all of the developments that have taken place over this time period, both in the realm of Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process and wider regional dynamics. My guest today is Ahmad Alili, Director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Centre, and we will try to throw a penetrative glance at this year's developments. Ahmad Bey, it's a great delight to welcome you.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you, Orkhan Bey. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, it's our pleasure. So this year, the year 2023, has been incredibly eventful. I remember when I was talking to colleagues and experts, political analysts, late 2022, they used to describe 2022 as a year of missed opportunities. I suppose we cannot say the same in relation to this year. There have been some considerable changes on the ground. So what is your evaluation of this year in the context of Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process and wider regional dynamics?
As you rightly mentioned, the regional dynamics were quite intensive this year in 2023. I would say that we saw the highest level, the most intensive diplomatic negotiations taking place in May, June, and that led to the increased expectations that we are going to sign something as soon as possible. And then that increased expectations turned into the, let's say, quite a big disappointment, especially when the process was taken to the United Nations Security Council 2 times. That was a big disappointment for Azerbaijan and for the regional dynamics, I would say. The military operation, I believe, that changed the station on the ground once more. And now we are facing completely new situation in the South Caucasus. It's become a bit cliche to talk about the new realities in the region, but the new realities of the 2020 Karabakh War, the new realities in the region of the 24th February 2022, and the new realities of the September 2023, these are the completely different realities and shows that our region, it transformed itself from quite, let's say in the middle of nowhere to some very interesting place where we see that other interesting players, they increase their presence and they sometimes even clash. So in this context, I would say that we, for the last 3 years, we see constant change of realities on the ground. And so that's why, frankly speaking, I like the events in 2023. They are somehow continuation of the events of 2020, but still very distinctive events deserving to be analyzed separately also. But in reality, we cannot say that there is like the calendar change from December and January, so things are going to be changed. But there are certain continuity in this event. So I would say that the region keeps changing, and these transformations are so profound that I would say that understanding them would take much longer time just to see what changed in reality. And so that is why it's even hard for me to make conclusions about 2020. And like that, so you can imagine like talking about the 2023, it's even harder. But again, we can conclude that the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast created in 1923, that I would say that 2023 was end of the entity in this context. So that is why we are truly in a new reality right now.
Thank you very much indeed. And in September 2023, Azerbaijan restored its full sovereignty over Karabakh. And many people would say the Karabakh issue, in terms of its practical contours, is already resolved. Although we don't have a peace deal with Armenia, but still the Karabakh component is resolved. Many people would argue in that fashion. So the question is, many experts were expecting this task to be accomplished by 2025. And so the fact that it happened in 2023 was not something which was taken for granted by many. So what do you think, what set of circumstances enabled Baku to accomplish this task in 2023?
I would say Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and it's not just Russia being, let's say, fully focused in Ukraine. It's also the increased interest of the European and the American powers in the region. As a result, we see that the Washington and the Brussels, they are willing to engage with the process as much as possible. So again, the most intensive diplomatic negotiation, the diplomatic process of 2023 took place starting to Washington. It started in May. The first week of the May, we had a 4-day meeting in Washington, and then it continued in the Brussels platform. And I would say that then it was continued by the quite a significant also involvement from Russian side, because there were components that, and as a result, we would see that the conditions on the ground, they changed a lot. But also, I would say that the Iran also it start understanding the regional dynamics much better. If at the beginning of the year, like in January, we would have Iran attacking Azerbaijan embassy in Tehran. By September and the early, I would say that there were so many signs that Tehran and Baku understand each other's reality, and the Tehran accepts the new regional dynamics in the region fully. And I would say that it's Aras corridor, the one that's going to connect Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan, passing via Iranian territory, not Armenian territory. That kind of like also shows that to a certain extent this changed. The Iran's approach to the regional dynamics also changed. 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, Iran was ready to launch military operation against Azerbaijan. It collected quite a large, let's say, quite an impressive military force in Azerbaijan borders. It's almost the force almost was equal to the overall Azerbaijan number of the Azerbaijani military forces. But by the September and October, you would see that Tehran accepted, and as a result, we see a couple of different realities. So that is why, like the war in Ukraine, that limits Russian opportunity to get involved in the regional affairs in South Caucasus. Also, it increased Russian dependence on Azerbaijan and Turkey. Also, it increased the interests of the Western powers in the South Caucasus. Also, it demonstrated that Iran also needs Azerbaijan for economic cooperation and for if it wants some presence in the region of South Caucasus, you cannot do that by going against Azerbaijan or ignoring Azerbaijan or trying to show Azerbaijan that you are going to do business with Armenia, and as a result, thanks to through Armenia, you are going to establish your presence in the South Caucasus. Baku demonstrated that if it against the presence of any external force in regional affairs, it can block. And Iran also understood that, and as a result, we have by the end of the December 2023, we have a new reality where we see that Baku is in natural relations with all former mediating powers and the current mediating powers. And Iran also, Baku established a new platform where it can engage with Armenia on a bilateral format. And this is who wants to limit influence of the external forces in the region, it can. So the way how the bilateral format was established in the region in the South Caucasus, that the initiator of this was Baku. Baku was willing to push for the format with no mediator in it. And because the geopolitical interest of the various groups, they would collide with each other, and the Baku would want to have a, let's say, so-called clean process with no mediator or guarantor present in the process, and the Baku achieved that. So again, if you start from the what led to this change, I would say that we have to look for the war in Ukraine, but we should not overestimate forget that the regional dynamics in the South Caucasus, the 2020 war, that started way before the war in Ukraine. So the conflict has its own dynamics. And I would say that it's distinctive. To like many aspects of this conflict in the South Caucasus, quite distinctive. But still, that enabled Azerbaijan to be more flexible, more, let's say, resourceful, and as a result, those, as you mentioned, as you rightly mentioned, those things that were planned to be implemented in 2025, they were accomplished in 2023 by Azerbaijan.
Many experts claim that external actors, heavyweights, need some time to adapt to the changed circumstances on the ground. So they will need to adapt, they need some time. But we also understand that the future peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia will be the result of bilateral talks. So we have got two elements, external factors and also the nature of the process, which must be bilateral. How do these two exigences coalesce in this context, you think?
I would say that in this context, we have to distinct two issues. The visible presence of the external powers and not so visible presence of the external powers. So if you are talking about the visible presence of the external factors, we have to understand that that comes with a certain, let's say, political ambition. And as I mentioned earlier, like the Azerbaijan demonstrated in 2021, also in 2023, that if it wants to limit presence of any external power, doesn't matter it borders with the region or not. Azerbaijan can do that. So there is no problem for Azerbaijan in doing so. So that is why that the visible presence of the external factors in that process, to some extent, that the visible presence might be, let's say, some investment to the future also. But invisible presence in the process, that's what I would say that Baku also wants. So then the question is that, is there any invisible presence in this process right now? Is there any somebody pushing for the bilateral format in this process? Frankly speaking, I would say so. Like from Azerbaijan perspective, Armenia being fully independent, fully, let's say, it being like the not taking into account the foreign factors from Azerbaijan perspective is a quite good outcome, but still there is a long way for the Armenian foreign policy. This is why I don't believe that Armenia would agree with the bilateral format with Azerbaijan without consulting with the other powers, the external powers in the region. And considering the Yerevan-Washington relations, Yerevan-Brussels relations, and then now with the developments taking place yesterday in Russia, even Yerevan-Moscow relations, I would say that there is a consent that Yerevan can be part of the bilateral process. So in this context, I would say that going back to your original question, like the presence of the external powers and the bilateral format, it's most likely there are foreign powers, they believe that they are going to gain a lot, even if their presence is not visible. So that is why, in this context, it's like the question is that who wins more if its presence is not visible? And frankly speaking, in this context, I believe that it's more Washington and Brussels.
I see. I mean, the 7th of December joint statement issued by Baku and Yerevan was a landmark agreement, of course. I was quite surprised myself. To what extent were you, as a person who keeps a beady eye on the Baku-Yerevan dynamics, surprised? Because I remember, I think you wrote on X platform, you described the 7th of December as a day of three quakes. There were three different developments. Of course, one was a proper quake, one was a snap election announcement, and the third one was this joint statement. Very surprised by that statement, because I personally had not anticipated this kind of statement to come out on the 7th of December.
Yeah, indeed. And then we had two earthquakes. And by the end of the day, we were asking each other that should we expect for the third earthquake. So the first earthquake was the real, or second earthquake was the early hours of the day, first half of the day, when the snap presidential elections they were announced. And the first earthquake was this. For me, it was very unexpected. I was, the day before we had a high-level delegation from United States visiting Baku, and it was like the northern regional visit just for visiting Baku. The U.S. high-level U.S. State Department delegation, they were in Baku, and we were looking for the, let's say, the outcomes, what can be. So we all were in the process of analyzing U.S.-Azerbaijan relations, and with the certain statements from the U.S. State Department months earlier that created quite a significant tension in Baku-Washington relations. We were in mood just to understand that will it bring back the Washington platform and how it's going to affect the Brussels platform. So we were in the process of analyzing that one, digesting that one. So certainly what happened with this bilateral format and the exchange of the Armenian and Azerbaijani servicemen with the Azerbaijan-Armenian supporting Azerbaijan's COP29, candidacy as a hosting country. These were quite the developments that nobody talked before, but the Karabakh Armenians being in Azerbaijan detention centers. The topic was kind of like the forgotten. Nobody used to talk about this issue, even in international conferences, in expert community. So that is why that was quite unexpected. But I have to tell you that the meeting that took place a week before between Shahin Mustafa and Miguel Gregorian, the way how it developed, it was clear that Shahin Mustafa, with his roots from the modern day Armenia and certain skills, I would say that we were expecting that there would be some continuation of this process. So that is why, even like knowing that that process is going to lead something positive, the bilateral statement and the exchange of the Armenian Azerbaijani servicemen, that was a truly earthquake for me.
And what do you think? What other confidence-building measures Baku and Yerevan may consider en route to a peace treaty? Because this 7th of December joint statement entailed two separate confidence-building measures, goodwill gestures. One was prisoner swap, and second one was Azerbaijan and Armenia supporting each other in terms of the international cooperation. What other confidence-building measures do you think that Azerbaijan and Armenia should work out and in order to get to that peace treaty?
Frankly speaking, right now I wouldn't want to talk about the confidence-building measures. I would talk about the peace deal itself. So it's like I believe that the peace deal itself is going to be the biggest confidence building measures. We should understand that the peace deal is not going to be the end of the process. In contrary, it's going to start quite a significant process. So with the establishment of the diplomatic relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that's going to open doors for so many opportunities. And now it kind of looks that the border delimitation demarcation is not going to be included to the peace deal. And most probably, if the logistical components, they are not going to be included in the peace deal also, the peace deal that we are going to sign, it's going to be mostly about the confidence building measures and establishing of the diplomatic relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And as a result of this peace deal, we can expect that in the future it's going to be if you have the engagement between Armenian and Azerbaijani diplomats, so you have to have a process that's going to support that process at society level, at expert community level, at society level. So most probably it might be, let's say, about the establishment of the economic forum or some platforms that Armenian Azerbaijani societies are going to discuss their economic cooperation, or it might be that can Azerbaijanis originally from the modern day Armenian, can they go back and they visit the graves of their ancestors there? And Armenians who left Baku, Ganja, can they come back and then have the visiting their cemeteries also? So in Azerbaijan and Armenian mentality, the cemeteries are quite a sacred place. It's a bit like the historical memory, I would say that in this context. So it's not just a place where you're like the significance of that for Armenia and Azerbaijan. That kind of steps might be quite a good confidence building measures. Bilateral statement that might postpone signing of the peace treaty. I would say that there was a certain urgency in international community to have some progress in Armenia-Azerbaijani peace process. So everybody was looking for certain, let's say, some positive development. So the bilateral statement that kind of create a sense of accomplishment in international community, and frankly speaking, Armenia and Azerbaijan also. So that is why I believe that the psychological satisfaction everybody had as a result of this bilateral statement and the exchange of the servicemen. Now it kind of like the peace deal kind of looks like yes, we can sign that, and I don't feel that urgency, frankly speaking. Our focus and Armenia and Azerbaijan should move on with this agenda and sign the peace deal as soon as possible.
Well, let's move on to the text of the prospective peace deal. Of course, we don't know the details. Only people who are closely involved in the peace negotiations know the nitty-gritty elements of that text. But Azerbaijani president said that after the restoration of Azerbaijani sovereignty over Karabakh, there's no major obstacle towards a peace deal. And Armenian side effectively saying that, substantial part of the work has been done and it could be signed at some point soon. But it is evident to everybody that there are certain elements regarding this peace treaty in relation to which Azerbaijan and Armenia cannot agree. On the basis of your observations, what do you think, what those elements are in relation to the peace treaty that Baku and Yerevan disagree? What Armenia wants to see in that text, which Azerbaijan does not want to see, and what Azerbaijan wants to include in that text that Armenia believes shouldn't be there. What is your evaluation, what is your prediction of those contentious elements?
Well, there are several issues in this regard we have to mention. The very first one is guarantors. Armenia
Yeah.
is willing to have someone present in the process as guarantors, and at this stage, Armenia wants European countries to be guarantors of this peace process. But Azerbaijan also wants to have Turkey as a balancing power present in the process. But even if you agree with this composition of the guarantors, so the regional realities dictate that you have to make sure that Russians and Iranians are around the table also. So you can create a certain platforms where Russians can be involved as guarantors in the process, but not Iranians, because the right now the relation between Washington and Tehran is quite, let's say that there are so many other issues that they need to resolve. So that's where I don't imagine any document where you can have the American and Iranian signatures under the same document. If Armenia and Azerbaijan succeeds in that, so Armenian and Azerbaijan leaders should be like, they should get the Nobel Peace Prize immediately, not for solving Armenian-Azerbaijan conflict, but for advancing U.S. and Iran peace process. So this is a very delicate process. So that is why Azerbaijan is willing to have the process with no guarantors or mediators in it. So that is why Azerbaijan is pushing for the bilateral format. So right now we see that there is understanding in Yerevan that the bilateral peace format is also something that Tehran should pursue. So and like the Yerevan in this context is quite, let's say, willing to engage with Azerbaijan on bilateral format. But there are two main issues. It's about border delimitation and demarcation, and also the Zangezur corridor. That there are so many questions about these corridors that we have to understand the nuances of this issue. The way how Armenia wants this corridor to function without FSB forces there, it's not realistic. The reality is that FSB forces already are present in the Iran-Armenia border, because it's the former Soviet Union Iran border, and as a result of that, Russian forces are stationed in Armenia, Iran, and Armenia-Turkey borders. So as a result of that, you cannot say that if Azerbaijan says that it doesn't want to have FSB troops present in like the next to the Zangezur corridor, and the railway connects. It's basically, it passes very close to the Araz River, which is the border line between Iran and Armenia. So it means that Baku has to fight a unity over these borders. So this is a quite important obstacle for the peace deal also, but also the border delimitation demarcation. The enclaves, they are very important. So they are very strategically located, and Azerbaijan wants land bridge to those enclaves. So, and when Armenia says that let's do the border delimitation demarcation based on the 1975 map, or the Soviet Union Army General Staff map. So it means that those enclaves should stay as enclaves within Armenian territory, which is for Azerbaijan, that sounds like in the future there will be much more problems in this regard. But there are other maps that shows that these enclaves, they have certain land bridge with Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan in certain places Azerbaijan intends. So that is why, like for Baku, it's very much even like 1975 map accepted as a basis of that. In certain specific places, more detailed maps should be applied. That was a problem between Soviet Armenia and the Soviet Azerbaijan. Realities that we have today, I would say that now Baku and Yerevan, they are solving the problems they inherited from their Soviet predecessors. So in this context, let's say that we have reached a point where we cannot imagine that we are going to talk like this 3 years ago. In none of the documents you can see anything about enclaves. So let's say former OSCE Minsk group documents, they had certain, and within that platform you had discussions on so many issues. You had so many solutions that later they were implemented in other documents. But when we are talking about this enclave issue, these three factors. They are the main problems between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But of course, those people who are involved into the more in the process in a more detailed manner, and I believe that their number is quite limited. They know much more about the process, and that they might have some additional comments on that. But that from where we stand, these three issues, they look quite problematic right now. But I believe that with the Alan Smanyan making a certain statement yesterday, and Armenian and Azerbaijan leaders engaging with each other with no mediator in between them. There are photos when the Pashinyan and Prime Minister Pashinyan and the President Aliyev, they talk to each other directly in a very casual manner. That shows that last 3 years and this frequent meetings that took place between Armenia and Azerbaijan, they created a certain atmosphere that where Armenian and Azerbaijan leaders, they can talk on casually, and they can lead the meeting simultaneously, and that everybody is going to film that. So I believe that atmosphere that was present yesterday in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Bey. Of course, the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace agenda is quite complicated. There are so many elements, not just about delimitation, demarcation, the issue of enclaves, and so on. The question is, to what extent we need to advance in relation to this to be able to sign initial peace treaty? Because as I understand, the peace treaty that Azerbaijan and Armenia aim to sign at some point soon is not going to be a comprehensive peace treaty. It will lay the foundations for further normalization. So probably it will entail some basic principles, will clarify certain points, but it will not put an end to all the conflicting points between the sides. So there's a fundamental issue, how far we have to advance. President Aliyev, when he was addressing the audience at ADA on the 6th of December, mentioned about the revanchist sentiments prevailing in Armenia. And from what he said, it seems that Azerbaijan needs to be absolutely certain that all of those revanchist forces are properly placated. And we know that there was recently talk of the government in exile by some separatists who are currently in Yerevan, and Shahramanyan's recent statement caused some perturbation, both in Yerevan and in Baku, by the way. So my question to you, and also we know that the Armenian constitution contains a chain of references amounting to territorial pretension against Azerbaijan. As you know, the preamble of their constitution refers to the Declaration of Independence dated 1990, and that refers to the decision of the Supreme Council, which was adopted in 1989. So to what extent do you think Azerbaijan could demand that Armenia should not just suppress those revanchist sentiments, but also possibly make some amendments to its constitution prior to signing peace deal with Baku?
Very interesting question, and I would say very nuanced. I like this level of the discussion, like when you go into the deep and try to understand the things in more detailed manner. I would say that the rumors in Armenia about the new upcoming elections. This is about the referendum. Yeah. So most probably the Armenian government is testing Armenian public about the possible referendum. So it's not going to be election, but most likely a referendum to change the constitution. So now it's kind of the rumors are out there, but Armenian government reps, they're denying it. And the way how they deny it, frankly speaking, that creates the impression that it's kind of like the circuit preparation for the public to say that, hey, we are going to have some sort of the legal process that's going to change our legal and political process that's going to change our constitution. So it's going to be part of the peace deal. But also, I would distinct the forces in Armenia. They did not want any agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We saw that the very next day of the bilateral statement, some 150 so-called Karabakh society representatives, they made announcement. They made a public call, basically. That statement was against the spirit of the bilateral statement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Those forces who want to block the Baku and Yerevan advancing together on this issue. So we should not see Armenian society and the government quite united about the recent developments taking place between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I would say that diaspora, the Karabakh Armenians, the representative of the various foreign diasporas within Armenia, and those Armenians who have relatives abroad, Russia, France, United States, but also we see that it's a thing change taking place in Armenia. The opposition tried to call protest meetings in the center of the Yerevan several times, and especially after September 2023, they failed. Did not want to in the central Yerevan to protest Pashinyan's recent decisions or the Pashinyan completely losing Karabakh to Azerbaijan. So I would say that now the leading sentiment within Armenia is that Karabakh for the last 30 years got a lot from Armenia and they don't give anything return. So that is why the public sympathy, the general public sympathy, it might be in line with more Pashinyan than the revanchist forces present in Armenia. Again, the public sympathy, the public sentiments in September 2020 and September 2023, and especially December 2023. In Armenia, these are the completely different let's say, societies. So that is why nowadays I would talk about some interest groups who want to present themselves as revanchist forces, and they want to block the advancement between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
I think it's worth mentioning that the reaction of, say, Civil Contract Party and the Pashinyan administration's members, the reaction was quite robust. They said that it's a national security risk for Armenia. It does go against the grain of Armenia's national interests. And my last question, Ahmad Bey, it's going to be a very basic question. It's my last question. So next year, 2024, in a nutshell, what is your fundamental expectation from the next year when it comes to Azerbaijan and Armenia and South Caucasus?
We don't have any, as we say, we don't have any magical ball to look and predict certain issues. So I would say that with the Armenian government reaction to the recent Shahramanyan and his colleagues' statement about the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and it's being functional, that's the distinct, like just want to push them out of the side, I would say that. So I would say that Armenian government now, it's very much interested in the signing peace deal also. And Baku and Yerevan, they can ignore all these issues that is not, let's say, they cannot reach agreement. And I believe in this context, those issues can be left to the future. For example, again, for the delimitation, demarcation, and
Sure.
Zangezur corridor, there can be separate agreements on those issues, but the framework agreement, very, let's say, very concise document, can be signed between mid-February and the mid-March.
My feelings are exactly the same. I think if Azerbaijan and Armenia decide to sign something very concise, short, basic, based on the mutual recognition of territorial integrity, sovereignty, without going into the details about delimitation, opening of communications, the peace treaty could be in the offing. But if it's our intention to conclude, to agree on all the conflicting points, I think it may take ages. And also, the reason why I asked about your expectations in relation to the next year, as you know, there's going to be presidential elections, and in Azerbaijan there's been talk about the Fourth Republic. By Fourth Republic, we understand a new Azerbaijan which recovered its territorial integrity, which is able to organize elections within the full confines of its sovereign borders. And in Armenia also they talk about a Fourth Republic. And the Fourth Republic in Armenia will be an Armenia which will get rid of this Miatsum ideology, will renew its constitutional identity, and will be hopefully a prosperous nation too. So in that sense, our destinies of our country, Armenia and Azerbaijan, are interrelated very deeply. That is my sort of reflection.
Yeah, I fully share what you just said. I would say that the region, the post-Soviet era in the region is definitely dead. If somebody had some reservations that the 2020 Karabakh War did not end the post-Soviet era in the region, the war in Ukraine that definitely demonstrated that that's the region that transformed beyond recognition. So the way how Azerbaijan tries to build its relations with the Central Asian countries, with the Georgia, with Turkey, with the Eastern and Southern European countries, and at the same time keeping good relations with economic relations with Russia and Iran, trying to bring them into the let's say, keeping their concerns in Azerbaijan rather also, that this is a new reality. So that is why I believe that both Baku and Yerevan, they should use this opportunity, and we hope that we can witness that in the upcoming years. There will be much more positive developments in this regard.
Thank you very much, Ahmad Bey. I'm most grateful to you, and I'm looking forward to our future conversations. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure talking to you and your audience.
Thank you.